my daughters were very young, and Saturday was always Daddy's Day with the two daughters. So we'd start out and try to go someplace with, different things, and I take them to the merry-go-round, and I took them different places, and as I'd sit there while they rode the merry-go-round, did all these things, sit on a bench, eating peanuts, I felt that there should be something built, some kind of an amusement enterprise built where that the parents and the children could have fun together.
When Walt Disney died in 1966, he left behind a secret note written in red pencil. Nobody was supposed to find it. But 4 years later, someone did. The paper had the name of a teenage actor, a TV show, and something about the CIA. Walt knew he was dying when he wrote it. Was this his final wish? A secret project? Or something more mysterious? After more than 50 years, the truth about Walt's last message is finally coming out. Walt Disney was born on December 5, 1901, in a small house at 1249 Tripp Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. He was the fourth of 5 children in a family that always struggled with money. His father, Elias Disney, worked as a carpenter and farmer but never found steady success. His mother, Flora Call Disney, had been a schoolteacher before dedicating herself to raising their children. Walt grew up with 3 older brothers, Herbert, Raymond, and Roy, and a younger sister, Ruth. Their home was modest, and their lives were shaped by hard work and strict discipline. In 1906, when Walt was 4, the family moved to a farm in Marceline, Missouri. Elias hoped for a fresh start, but financial struggles followed them. Despite this, Walt found happiness in the countryside. He spent hours sketching animals and nature, fascinated by the world around him. His first paid drawing was a simple sketch of a neighbor's horse, something he proudly sold for a few cents. Marceline was also where he first experienced the magic of storytelling. He would lie beneath a massive cottonwood tree, which he called the dreaming tree, imagining stories that played out in his mind. Even as a child, Walt had a creative spirit and a knack for business. He once put on a small circus show in the family barn, dressing up animals and charging neighborhood kids a dime to watch. His love for art grew stronger when he discovered a socialist newspaper his father subscribed to, called Appeal to Reason. He didn't care about the articles, but he loved the cartoons. He started copying them, unknowingly taking his first steps toward a future in animation. Life in Marceline was peaceful, but it didn't last. In 1911, financial troubles forced the Disneys to leave their farm and move to Kansas City. Elias bought a newspaper route for the Kansas City Star and the Kansas City Times, putting Walt and his brother Roy to work. Every morning, Walt woke up before 3:30 a.m. to deliver papers, sometimes in the freezing cold. After school, he had to do it all over again. The work was exhausting, and Elias didn't pay his sons for their efforts. Walt hated the job, but it built resilience in him. Despite the tough routine, he never let go of his passion for drawing. He enrolled in Saturday art classes at the Kansas City Art Institute through a YMCA program. He also signed up for a correspondence course on cartooning. With no proper studio or materials, he practiced whenever he could, sketching on scraps of paper or the margins of his school books. By 1917, the Disneys moved back to Chicago. Walt, now 16, attended McKinley High School, where he became the cartoonist for the school newspaper. At night, he took courses at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts to improve his skills. But the world was changing. World War I was in full force, and Walt wanted to do his part. Eager to enlist, he tried to join the military, but at 16, he was too young. Instead of accepting rejection, he altered his birth certificate, changing his birth year from 1901 to 1900. The plan worked. In September 1918, he was accepted into the Red Cross Ambulance Corps and sent to France. Though the war ended just before he arrived, he spent months transporting officers and delivering supplies. During his free time, he decorated ambulances with cartoons. It was a small way of bringing creativity into a serious job. In September 1919, Walt returned to Kansas City. He was 17, broke, and unsure of his next steps. But one thing was certain: he wanted a career in art. He started working at Pesman Rubin Commercial Art Studio in Kansas City, a small advertising studio inside the L.B. Price Mercantile Company building. He made $50 a month as an apprentice, creating illustrations for catalogs, theater ads, and farm equipment. While the pay was modest, the job changed everything. This was where he met Ab Iwerks, another young artist who would later help him shape the future of animation. But the opportunity didn't last long. By December 1919, Disney lost his job when the studio ran into financial trouble. A few weeks later, Iwerks was laid off too. Instead of giving up, they took a risk and started their own business, Iwerks Disney Commercial Artists. It was their first step into entrepreneurship, but it didn't go as planned. Without steady clients, they struggled to make money, and the business failed. Even though their first attempt didn't work out, it strengthened their partnership and taught Disney valuable lessons about running a business. Determined to keep going, Disney decided to focus on animation. In 1921, he founded Laugh-O-Gram Studio in Kansas City. It was an ambitious project. He wanted to create short films based on fairy tales, blending animation with live-action elements. The studio was set up in the McConaughey Building and quickly became a creative hub for young animators. But money problems hit again. One of the worst setbacks came from a deal with Pictorial Clubs of Tennessee. They had commissioned an $11,100 project, but only paid a $100 deposit. The rest of the money never arrived, leaving the studio in financial trouble. Disney tried everything to keep the business running. He cut costs, skipped meals, and even let go of employees. But by July 1923, Laugh-O-Gram Studio went bankrupt. Its final project, Alice's Wonderland, introduced an idea Disney would later refine, combining live-action actors with animated worlds. Even though the studio failed, this film caught the attention of New York distributors, giving Disney one last chance to rebuild his career. With almost nothing left, Disney moved to Hollywood in August 1923. He had just $40 and a suitcase full of drawings. His brother Roy was already there, recovering from tuberculosis, and they decided to work together. On October 16, 1923, they founded Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio. Their first major project was Alice Comedies, inspired by Alice's Wonderland. Soon, they got their first big break. Margaret J. Winkler, one of the first female film distributors in Hollywood, signed a deal with them. She agreed to pay $1,500 for 6 episodes of Alice Comedies. This deal not only saved Disney from financial collapse, but also set the foundation for what would later become the Walt Disney Company. By 1927, Disney had his first real hit with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Created under contract with Universal Pictures, Oswald became a popular character, bringing national recognition to Disney's studio. But in 1928, everything changed. When Disney traveled to New York expecting to renew his contract, he discovered that his distributor, Charles Mintz, had secretly taken control of Oswald. Worse, Mintz had signed most of Disney's animators to new contracts, leaving him with no team and no rights to the character he had created. Mintz gave Disney a choice: accept lower pay or lose Oswald entirely. Disney refused to give in. Instead, he walked away and made a promise to himself. He would never again create something he didn't own. That moment of betrayal led to something even bigger. On a train ride from New York to Los Angeles in early 1928, Walt sat with a sketch pad, searching for a new idea. He drew a small, round-eared mouse and named him Mortimer. But his wife, Lillian, thought the name sounded too serious. She suggested something friendlier: Mickey. That one change made history. Mickey's design was simple, but it worked. His big round ears, oversized shoes, and expressive face made him easy to animate. Walt's top animator, Ab Iwerks, played a key role in bringing Mickey to life. The character first appeared in two silent cartoons, Plain Crazy and The Gallopin' Gaucho, but neither found success. Without sound, they struggled to attract attention. Everything changed on November 18, 1928. That day, Steamboat Willie premiered at Universal's Colony Theater in New York City. Unlike earlier cartoons, this one had synchronized sound. Inspired by the groundbreaking film The Jazz Singer in 1927, Walt knew sound was the future. He timed every whistle, foot tap, and musical note to match the action. Audiences had never seen or heard anything like it. Mickey, now a mischievous steamboat pilot, came to life in a way that silent films never allowed. The crowd loved it. Steamboat Willie became a hit. Mickey had a voice too, and for nearly 2 decades, that voice belonged to Walt himself. From 1928 to 1946, Walt provided Mickey's cheerful, high-pitched tone. Late at night, after long hours running his studio, he stepped into the recording booth to bring his character to life. His personal connection to Mickey made the character feel real, but as Disney Studios grew, Walt had less time. In 1946, he passed the role to Jimmy McDonald, who continued as Mickey's voice until 1977. Mickey wasn't just a cartoon star, he became a symbol of hope. During the Great Depression, when people struggled to afford basic needs, Mickey's cheerful personality brought laughter. By the 1930s, he had appeared in over 130 films. He also made his way into newspapers through comic strips, reaching fans around the world. Mickey's influence stretched beyond animation. In 1933, a Mickey Mouse wristwatch became one of the most popular products of its time. By 1955, when Disneyland opened, Mickey wasn't just a cartoon character anymore. He was the face of an empire. Fans could finally meet him in person. Walt never stopped believing in Mickey. Even as the company expanded, he remained connected to the character that saved his career. Today, Mickey's voice has been passed down to new actors, with Brett Iwan taking on the role in 2009. But no matter how much time passes, Mickey Mouse remains as loved as ever. In 1929, Walt Disney launched Silly Symphonies, a series of animated short films that changed the future of animation. These films weren't just for entertainment. They were experiments where Disney tested new ideas and pushed the limits of what animation could do. One of the biggest breakthroughs came in 1932 with Flowers and Trees. It was the first full-color cartoon using the new Technicolor process. The difference was stunning. For the first time, audiences saw rich greens, deep reds, and bright blues instead of simple black and white drawings. The film won Disney his first Academy Award, proving that color wasn't just a gimmick. It was the future. Another major leap came in 1937 with The Old Mill. This short film introduced the multiplane camera, a device that changed how animation looked on screen. Instead of flat backgrounds, artists could layer multiple images to create depth. Some shots had up to 7 layers moving at different speeds, making it feel like a real camera was moving through a 3-dimensional world. The impact was so great that Disney won a Scientific and Engineering Academy Award for the innovation. Beyond technology, Silly Symphonies helped Disney explore new ways of storytelling. Unlike Mickey Mouse cartoons, which focused on humor, these films experimented with emotion and atmosphere. The Skeleton Dance, 1929, was eerie and hypnotic, while The Three Little Pigs, 1933, became a national sensation. Its song, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, became an anthem during the Great Depression, symbolizing resilience during tough times. By combining new technology with strong storytelling, Disney was proving that animation was more than just entertainment. It was art. But his biggest gamble was still ahead. By 1937, Walt Disney was ready to take the biggest risk of his career. He wanted to make Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first full-length animated feature. At the time, the idea seemed ridiculous. No one believed audiences would sit through a 90-minute cartoon. Critics called it Disney's folly, predicting it would ruin him. Disney ignored the doubts. He invested $1.7 million into the project, an enormous amount during the Great Depression. He even mortgaged his house to keep the film going. More than 750 artists worked on the animation, using techniques never seen before. To make characters feel real, animators studied live-action footage. They gave Snow White and the Prince natural movements, making them more lifelike than any animated character before. The multiplane camera added depth to scenes, making forests look vast and castles feel grand. The film's music was woven into the story, making it more immersive than anything audiences had seen. When Snow White premiered on December 21, 1937, the risk paid off. The film was an instant hit, earning $8 million during its initial release, a record-breaking success. It also received an honorary Academy Award, proving that animated films could be just as powerful as live action. More importantly, it saved Disney's studio from financial collapse. Without Snow White, there would be no Pinocchio, 1940, Fantasia, 1940, or any of the Disney classics that followed. But just as Disney reached new heights, the world was about to change. World War II created challenges that nearly destroyed the Disney studio. As war spread across Europe, key international markets disappeared. Without those audiences, films like Pinocchio and Fantasia struggled at the box office despite their artistic success. Then, in 1941, the U.S. Army took over half of Disney's Burbank studio for military operations. The company had to shift focus, producing wartime propaganda films like Der Führer's Face, 1943, and military training shorts starring Donald Duck. These projects helped keep the studio running, but they weren't as profitable as Disney's pre-war films. Then came another crisis. In 1941, tensions inside the studio exploded into a labor strike. Animators were frustrated with low wages and long hours. When Disney fired employees who pushed for unionization, more than 200 workers walked out. The strike lasted for months, growing so intense that federal mediators had to step in. Even though a settlement was reached, the damage was lasting. Many of Disney's best artists left, and his relationship with his employees was never the same. The war years were some of the hardest of Disney's career. But, as always, he learned from setbacks. He realized the importance of expanding his company beyond animation. This idea would lead to some of his biggest successes. By the 1960s, Walt Disney had already changed animation forever. Now he was ready to prove that his storytelling magic could work in live action. His biggest success in this area was Mary Poppins, 1964, a film that combined live action with animation in ways never seen before. To make it work, Disney's team used groundbreaking techniques like matte painting, animatronics, and the sodium vapor process, a forerunner of modern green screens. These methods allowed actors to interact with animated characters seamlessly, creating a world that felt both real and magical. Starring Julie Andrews in her film debut, Mary Poppins was released on August 27, 1964. It became an instant hit, earning over $103 million worldwide during its theatrical run. It also set a record for any Disney film at the time, with 13 Academy Award nominations, winning 5, including Best Actress for Andrews. But Mary Poppins was more than just a box office success. It changed how family films were made. It proved that movies for children could also have emotional depth and sophistication. This success encouraged Disney to keep expanding beyond animation while still pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Walt Disney got the idea for Disneyland from his own life as a father. In the 1930s and 1940s, he would take his daughters, Diane and Sharon, to amusement parks like Griffith Park in Los Angeles. They loved the rides, but Walt usually sat on a bench, eating peanuts and watching. He noticed that most parks didn't offer much for parents and kids to enjoy together. That's when the idea started forming in his mind. He didn't want just another park with rides. He wanted a place where families could step into different worlds, experience stories, and create memories together. Walt's childhood also played a big role in shaping his vision. He grew up in Marceline, Missouri, a small town filled with charm and community spirit. He wanted Disneyland's Main Street, USA, to capture that feeling. But his inspiration didn't stop there. In Copenhagen, he visited Tivoli Gardens, a beautifully designed park that mixed entertainment with immersive scenery. He also admired Greenfield Village in Michigan, which brought history to life through detailed recreations. Walt took all these ideas and turned them into something completely new. Disneyland would be more than an amusement park. It would be a living storybook, a place where imagination became reality. It took over 15 years for his dream to take shape. At first, Disneyland was just sketches and ideas. Slowly, it became a full concept, and finally, construction began. On July 17, 1955, the park opened in Anaheim, California. It was the first of its kind, divided into 4 themed lands: Adventureland, Fantasyland, Frontierland, and Tomorrowland. No one had ever seen anything like it before. Today, Disneyland is more than just a park. It's a cultural icon that has inspired theme parks all over the world. But Disneyland's opening day was a disaster. That Sunday, July 17, 1955, became known as Black Sunday because almost everything went wrong. Walt had planned for a press preview with around 6,000 guests, but counterfeit tickets spread, and 28,000 people flooded the park, far beyond what it could handle. Traffic stretched for 7 miles on the Santa Ana Freeway. Some families abandoned their cars and walked the rest of the way. Inside, the problems kept piling up. The Mark Twain riverboat was packed beyond its limit and nearly capsized. A gas leak forced Fantasyland to shut down. Women's high heels sank into freshly poured asphalt that had softened under the summer heat. And because of a plumber's strike, Walt had to choose between working restrooms or drinking fountains. He picked restrooms, which led to complaints from guests desperate for water on a scorching hot day. Despite the chaos, Disneyland bounced back fast. Just 7 weeks after opening day, over 1 million visitors had walked through its gates. Walt and his team learned from their mistakes, and those lessons helped Disneyland grow into the success it is today. But Walt wasn't done. In the 1960s, he started working on something even bigger: Walt Disney World in Florida. He didn't want it to be just another Disneyland. He envisioned an entire resort with hotels, entertainment, and a city of the future called EPCOT, Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. He dreamed of a place where 20,000 people could live in a futuristic city with underground transportation and no cars on the streets. Sadly, he passed away in December 1966, before he could see it happen. His team carried on his plans, but instead of a city, EPCOT became a theme park. It finally opened in 1982, keeping Walt's spirit of innovation alive. Even today, Disney parks continue to expand. Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World is adding 2 new themed lands, one dedicated to Disney villains and another inspired by Pixar's Cars. These new additions reflect the same dream Walt had from the beginning. Walt Disney married Lillian Bounds on July 13, 1925. The ceremony took place at her brother's home in Lewiston, Idaho. It was a small gathering with close family and friends. Lillian had been working as a secretary at Walt Disney Studios when they met. Walt had once told himself he wouldn't marry until he turned 25 and saved $10,000. But his feelings for Lillian changed his mind. She wore a lavender dress she had sewn herself. Her father had passed away, so her uncle walked her down the aisle. The wedding was officiated by the rector of Lewiston's Episcopal Church of the Nativity. It was a modest start to a marriage that would last over 40 years. The early years were not always easy. Walt worked long hours and often left Lillian feeling alone. But through it all, she remained an important part of his life. She even helped shape Disney history. When Walt introduced his new cartoon character as Mortimer Mouse, Lillian thought the name sounded too serious. She suggested Mickey Mouse instead, and Walt agreed. That one change helped create an icon. In 1955, the couple celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary on the Mark Twain riverboat at Disneyland. The park was just days away from opening, but Walt took the time to celebrate with Lillian. It was a rare moment away from his work, a reminder of the life they had built together. When Walt passed away in 1966, Lillian continued his legacy. She dedicated herself to philanthropy and in 1987 donated $50 million to help build the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. As a father, Walt Disney was protective and private. He and Lillian had 2 daughters. Diane Marie was born on December 18, 1933, after Lillian had suffered 2 miscarriages. They wanted Diane to have a sibling, so in 1936, they adopted Sharon May. Walt loved his daughters, but kept them away from the spotlight. The 1932 Lindbergh baby kidnapping had left him fearful, so he made sure Diane and Sharon lived as normal a life as possible. Unlike other Hollywood families, he refused to use them for publicity. Despite his success, Walt Disney's reputation has been questioned by allegations of anti-Semitism. The claims have followed him for decades, largely because of his involvement with the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals. Some believed the group held anti-Semitic views, and Walt's association with it fueled speculation. Critics point to moments like the 3 Little Pigs cartoon, which featured a Jewish stereotype in an early version. Some former employees also claimed he made discriminatory remarks. However, many argue there is no clear evidence of anti-Semitism in Walt's actions. He worked with Jewish artists and donated to Jewish charities, including a New York orphanage and a college. During World War II, he produced anti-Nazi propaganda films like Der Führer's Face. The controversy resurfaced in 2014 when actress Meryl Streep publicly accused him of being racist and misogynistic. Her comments reignited the debate, but without definitive proof, the discussion remains unsettled. Walt was known for his perfectionism, but his leadership style often frustrated employees. He was deeply involved in every part of production and expected his vision to be followed exactly. Some saw him as a genius, while others felt he was too controlling. During the making of Bambi, animators recalled how he obsessed over details like how raindrops should land on leaves. He did not welcome creative disagreements and kept a close watch on how things were done. While some employees admired his commitment, others felt unappreciated. Yet his strict approach helped Disney films maintain a level of quality that set them apart. Disney has also faced criticism for avoiding difficult topics in its films. Stories were often simplified, leaving out complex historical details. Pocahontas painted a romanticized version of history. Tarzan was set in Africa, but had no African characters. Older films like Dumbo and Peter Pan included racial stereotypes. In response, Disney has added disclaimers on streaming platforms, acknowledging the offensive content. More recent controversies have focused on Disney's relationship with global markets. The 2020 remake of Mulan was filmed in Xinjiang, a region tied to human rights abuses against Uyghur Muslims. The credits even thanked Chinese government agencies linked to the area. Critics argued that Disney prioritized business over ethics. Walt Disney had been a heavy smoker for most of his life. He picked up the habit during World War I and never quit. He preferred unfiltered cigarettes, often trying different brands, but always returning to his favorite. In early November 1966, doctors diagnosed him with lung cancer. By then, the disease had already spread to his left lung and lymph nodes. Surgery was the only option. On November 7, 1966, doctors at St. Joseph's Hospital in Burbank removed most of his left lung. After the operation, his family received devastating news. His condition was terminal. They estimated he had 6 months to 2 years left. Despite treatments like cobalt therapy, his health declined quickly. Smoking had already weakened his lungs, and an old spinal injury from a polo accident made things worse. His body couldn't recover. Just over a month after surgery, on December 15, 1966, Walt Disney passed away. He was 65 years old. 4 years later, something unusual surfaced. In 1970, Dave Smith became the first official Disney archivist. His job was to catalog Walt's office, which had been left untouched since 1966. While sorting through papers, he found a handwritten note titled TV Projects in Production. It was written in red grease pencil, a favorite of Walt's for quick notes. The note listed 4 names. The first was Ron Miller, Walt's son-in-law. He was already working as a producer, and it seemed Walt had been planning a bigger role for him. The second was Two Way Down Cellar. This later became a 2-part television special that aired in January 1968. It told the story of 3 boys who discovered a secret tunnel leading to a haunted house and a group of counterfeiters. The third was Kurt Russell. At the time, he was a 15-year-old actor under contract with Disney. Walt had personally mentored him, signing him to a 10-year deal. He believed Kurt had the potential to become a major star. Oddly, Walt had spelled his name Kurt on the note. The last entry was CIA-Mobley. This was the most mysterious part. It seemed to refer to Roger Mobley, a young actor best known for his role in Adventures of Gallagher. He played a teenage journalist solving mysteries. But why did Walt write CIA next to his name? That remains a mystery. Kurt Russell later recalled being shown the note after Walt's death. At the time, he didn't think much of it, but later, he realized its significance. Walt had taken a special interest in him, often asking for his opinion on creative projects. They even played ping pong together at the Disney studio. As for Roger Mobley, his life took an unexpected turn. After his acting career, he joined the Green Berets and served in the Vietnam War. Some believe Walt's note might have been a reference to Mobley's future, though no one knows for sure. Even in his final days, Walt Disney was thinking ahead. The note wasn't just a list of names. It was a glimpse into the mind of a man who never stopped planning for the future, even when he knew his own time was running out.